Hey, listeners, thanks for tuning into the podcast. I just want to take a moment to mention the podcast sponsor, RetroGameStore.com.au. Head over there for all your Game Boy refurbish and repair needs. Screens, shells, buttons, and all the bits and pieces. And there's a complete custom build made to order service as well. Also, plenty more retro gaming goodness like video cables, display stand and power supplies, controls, etc. And you can add the code PixelPie at checkout to get 10% off your order. Also, take a moment to say if you enjoyed this episode and haven't already, give it a subscribe or follow and a review where you can. And maybe you want to recommend the Pixel Pie podcast to anyone you know that would enjoy it. That'd be really appreciated. So thanks for listening, and now let's get on with the show.
Hey, I'm Bob from RetroRGB, and you're listening to the Pixel Pie podcast.
G'day, Bob. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. I really do appreciate your time. This is going to kind of date the episode a bit for anybody that's going to listen to this and is a consumer of your content. But this morning I sat down on my couch and had my breakfast because it's AM here, and I'm in the future and you're PM, and you were doing a live stream. Putting a Super Famicom, quite a beat up old yellow one, into one of those gorgeous new crystal clear shells, which I'm excited about because I've got something on the floor here that deserves love. But yeah, so you've already had a bit of a busy day, and I guess that's kind of it's that sort of stuff is the reason why I've asked if you would be happy to come and chat with me. And yeah, so maybe tell us whereabouts are you, mate?
I'm right outside of New York City. I was right in the middle of New York City for a while, but I'm kind of back around the area that I grew up because, it's just money, right? Like you got to be to sustain a normal life in New York City, especially in Manhattan. You got to make a lot of it, and I don't. But I make enough to drink a beer and have podcasting equipment, so I'm certainly happy. But.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Is it? We'll get more into sort of the gaming and all that sort of business because that's obviously Pixel Pie podcast. There's got to be a link there, and there's a very solid link, but Is that sort of stuff? Is that all you do? Like, is that your full-time gig? The sort of podcasting?
Yeah, I've been RetroRGB doing that full-time for 3.5 years now. And it's my favorite job I've ever had, and it's by far the hardest job I've ever had. Like in every possible way. And whenever I say stuff like that, people, not everybody, but a lot of people interpret that as complaining or being ungrateful, and it's the opposite. But nothing in life is perfect, nothing. And if it is, you're probably a serial killer or on way better meds than I've ever tried. So it's just one of those things where it's like, to get the bare minimum done is like a 50-hour week, and then, oh, by the way, if I want to do a fancy video on top of that, it's whatever that takes. So I do love it, but it's everything I got, so it's one of those things where like I wouldn't want to do anything else, but I certainly, sometimes this just takes a chunk out of me, which I could use more chunks taken out of me. Unfortunately, that was metaphor and not for real. Not enough time to exercise is certainly putting a bit more on the front, as are these dark beers, but I can't get rid of these. By the way, it always cracks me up when I talk to my Aussie friends that like it's almost 8 p.m. at night here, and I'm drinking my first beer, and you're probably like having your cup of coffee or like a juice or something. You're easing into your morning.
Yeah, it is bizarre. It's also weird when I talk to people in the UK because I'll be sitting there and have my dinner, around sort of 7 p.m. and for them they're just having their coffee and stuff. So yeah, I can see that. Yeah. So do you mind me sort of asking you, because I'm always interested in why someone gets to a point where they're able to, because it's obviously successful, and be confident enough to do, say, for example, what you're doing. I mean, a lot of people aren't, a lot of people I've spoken to here, they're not doing it for a business. They're doing it purely for love. But when you are doing it and sort of going, you know what, I can make $1 and I can really enjoy this. And I think, I'm always curious as to what was kind of the lead up. Like, because a lot of what you do is very complex, video management. I've worked in the video conferencing industry, and I very quickly got out of my depths as to like cable formats and things like that was okay. But once we started getting right into especially when you start doing like we'd retrofit like older buildings, like older boardrooms, and you'd have all of a sudden you have this gear that was coaxial, but we need to be able to plug an Apple laptop into this. So you're getting all these HDMI adapters and this and that and latency and just things just not talking. It all becomes an IP network. And I was like, oh man.
And you have a $25,000 custom wooden table in the middle of the boardroom.
Yes.
With the coax already run through the
Absolutely.
bottom. And they look at you going, well, how come you can't turn that into a network cable?
Yes.
I've lived that. I've lived that.
So what did you do prior to this current life of making content and really kind of throwing yourself at? I guess to summarize, I would very much call you an educator. I've learned a lot about, like, even say, for example, simple things. And I'm going to talk a lot now, but I'm going to give you the opportunity. I have a bunch of those 8-bit controllers, the Bluetooth controllers, because I came from emulation on a Raspberry Pi. And, a couple of the M30s, a couple of the SN30s, and a Pro as well. And they're freaking fantastic for a Pi with shaders and an LCD. But as I kind of moved on to, someone gave me a big Trinitron, and then I was like, turn the shaders off. And then I got actual consoles. And I was like, gee, it'd be nice. I have 7 consoles. It'd be nice to have less cables. And I was looking for, should I go for the Bluetooth adapter or get the 2.4 gig stuff? And I was able to read an article that you wrote about the comparison in latency between the same units, but the 2.4 version versus the Bluetooth, and showing the variation from the Bluetooth. And even though it could be great, it was primarily a little bit more laggy than the 2.4, which was locked on. This will be your latency, predictable. I'm not a smart dude.
It's funny, but I could bring that up though.
I could read that and understand it, and I chose not to spend my money on the on the Bluetooth dongle. And that's where I think you come into your own. I've said before, anybody can tell you what you should spend it on, but half the time you're telling me what I shouldn't. And I think that's really great. Without being derogatory, you're super fair.
No, thank you. Yeah, I'm never here to spread drama, but it's funny because that specific article that you're referencing, this is why I love doing RetroRGB. That I didn't write that. Somebody contacted me out of the blue and was like, hey, I did all this testing. Would you like to publish it? I was like, yeah. I said, hey, would you be willing to teach people how to do that? And they're like, well, sure, could you write that up? So I basically, unfortunately, that's what it's like to be friends with me. You give me one thing and I ask for 5 things, but we ended up writing a whole guide of how to use an oscilloscope to test yourself. Yeah. So that's the stuff that I love. It's not just here's the answer to the question. It's here's how we got to that answer. Here's everything that we're sure of, but here's how you could check yourself. That's why I get so uppity when people tell me like lag isn't real. You're just lying for your affiliate link to sell your scaler. I don't sell scalers, by the way, but like the things that you have to deal with because people get insulted that they realize they didn't do any research. So rather than be like, oh darn, I messed that up, they're like, no, it is you who is the liar. And test yourself. Come back. If you find that I tested wrong, I'm all ears. But if you're just mad because you wasted $20 on something you shouldn't have, that's your problem, not my problem.
So you're very much down the teaching a man to fish as opposed to just giving him a fish, that kind of parable.
Both. Here's a fish. Here's how I got it. Here's which ones don't eat the blowfish.
Yeah, that's right.
That stuff too.
So where does all this experience come? I mean, a lot of people kind of just garage hackers, and someone gave them this tool, and a multimeter leads to a different thing, and eventually you're using big tools. Where does all this come from in your life? Were you tinkering with your dad, or
from birth? Like if it plugged in, I wanted to mess with it. Like I think my first time I electrocuted myself, I just was able to walk or something like that because I was always experimenting with something. Yeah, and it's just an obsession my whole life, and so often I end up enjoying the technical process more than the goal of things, which you could say that from anybody who does anything creatively, whether it's painting or rebuilding a car or whatever it might be. The process, it's not always about the destination, it's about the journey. Sometimes that saying is so vomit inducing but also so accurate at the same time. So it's
I listened to a podcast yesterday about I think the actual series is called Darknet Tales or something. A lot of it is like kind of darknet stuff, but this thing was particularly about a guy who grew up sort of like a high school, didn't get along with people, started like stealing and selling clothes, That didn't work out. Created a company that made brake pads for cars. That didn't work out. Went back to illegal and decided he was going to counterfeit $20 US bills. And basically was just one of those people that's like, when I get a challenge, the more complicated and the higher the risk is, the more I give it. And he invested every dollar and basically printed $250 million worth of $20 US bills. And the whole concept was to kind of push them out into 3 or 4 main sort of drug dealer cartel type people and push them into Europe, and they would trickle their way back. In the end, he got busted big time and managed to just sort of bully his lawyer into talking him down and down and down and down and down until finally his final negotiation was, I'll give you the other 200, I'll give you the other 100 mil sitting in a truck and the printing press if you drop all my charges. And of course, the FBI is like, well, we don't want that money out there. But this dude just every step had to buy a press, had to hire a guy, had to ask the some place in Afghanistan or Pakistan to make the paper with the thread and this and that and the other, step after step after step. That was a journey. That dude just went so hard.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I wish I had that ability to convince people of the truth, let alone scam somebody.
Yeah. I mean, he even had to go to the point where the little thread that goes through a $20 bill, it says US 20. So when he was sort of slowly going back to the paper manufacturer, instead of just going US 20, they'd be like, sounds like this guy's going to make money. He was making bonds for a company. So it was like, we're doing 30s and 40s. And just at the last moment, he rang them back up and said, we'll make it 20s. And they didn't ask any questions. These little ways of just getting the ball constantly rolling.
That's funny. That's tricky.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, it is always a journey, I guess. Did you, going through school, was this sort of something that you were always into, or was it on the side, or were you like in electronics labs, or?
You know, I knew during high school that I either wanted to do something related to computers or related to music or both, if possible.
I see a bunch of guitars on your wall there.
Yeah, it's like the only thing I'm actually really good at.
Yeah, that's
or was. I haven't played in like 6 months, but
yeah.
You know, with the move and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I was just listening to a podcast with somebody who's a very, very smart human being who made a very stupid comment about you could tell almost everything you need to know about somebody with their high school GPA and their SAT scores. And I'm like,
maybe
I was so bored throughout all of high school that I did the bare minimum just to pass. I'm pretty sure I was on acid when I took my SATs. I'm pretty sure. And you know, and it's one of those things where it was a joke to me. I was like, this is ridiculous. I'm going to do the bare minimum until I get to real life. And then I would bet that from my first corporate job on, if you asked anybody I worked with, even people that didn't like me, like, was Bob a hard worker and did he do a good job? They'd all say yes.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's like, you can't judge somebody by test scores and what they did in school. For me, it was just like, you know, this is all useless. Get me out into the real world and let me start trying. But yeah, no, for school, I just did whatever I had to do to pass, and I didn't really care.
Right. So you didn't sort of have like a path, like I'm going to be an engineer or a rocket scientist, and it kind of fell through and you end up like modern Nintendos instead or something like that.
No, and in fact, after I graduated high school, I saw a lot of people. I think I graduated in '99, and I was the first generation that I started seeing a lot of people spending every penny that they're going to have for the next 20 years on college. And I could just tell, like, that person's never going to graduate. You know, that person, you know, they want a what degree? You know, how are you going to get a job for that? So I ended up going to a tech school that had just got bought out by another bigger accredited college. So I think I paid like 10 grand to get in and I graduated with a certificate, but I graduated with a certificate from an accredited college. And on top of all that, because they were rolling the programs in, they kind of forgot about all of us. So we didn't really learn much. So it was like high school too, where it was just like, oh boy. And, you know, I had 1 or 2 great teachers that helped me out with stuff that I wasn't familiar with, but I was such a huge nerd that, like, the Windows XP, or no, it was the Windows 98 class or something. Or I think it was 95 because they hadn't even updated their books. But like, that was just a joke. I was like, would you like me to show you how to do this? Because me and everybody that was in my high school that was a nerd used to do this, since then. So yeah, I just did that. I got a corporate job, and then I did IT style stuff. But the stuff that I was always the best at, and the jobs that I always loved the most, were the same as RetroRGB with a different name on it. It was just me being the middleman. Like, you know, the customer needs the product, but you can't send grumpy developers out to talk to the customer. So I got to be the middleman. Or, you know, when I was out in Asia designing computers, it was, you know, the thermal people hate the motherboard manufacturer, so I got to sit in the meetings and do that. So it was the same style of just having as much technical knowledge as you can without actually being an expert in one thing, but learning enough about all of it to hold your own in the conversations, put the puzzle pieces together. And not because I was smarter than anybody. It was the opposite. I was surrounded by people infinitely smarter than I will ever be, but because I saw all of the pieces of the pie, I was able to arrange it into a circle and get it all to fit together. And it's just a matter of me enjoying doing that, where everybody else I was working at with, that was their least favorite. So it was perfect. So.
I spent quite a bit of time in hospitality prior to, I guess, my early years of working, you know, the early teens into early 20s. And, you know, some of the best kitchens I ever worked in, whether it be as wait staff or actually in the kitchen, were not necessarily run by chefs, but they were run by cooks that had been around a long time, and they may not be the best at this and the best at that, but they were able to bring a team together and understand that here's some strengths and here's some strengths, and we can work this out. It's a talent, because everybody wants to kind of be the smartest guy in the room. And if you're willing to sit back and sort of go, I'm not, but I can tell you what I think he's trying to tell you. And I think we can get a lot done here.
Yeah, working around everybody's egos is always an interesting thing. And mine is always, I never have to be right. I never have to be the smartest one in the room. But if I feel strong enough, you got to listen to my idea, even if everybody's going to poo-poo it. And I can't tell you how many times I've farted out the stupidest idea, but in saying it, two people light up and go, not that, but what about this? So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, if I'm on a path to something, roll with me for a minute here, because I'm seeing so much wider of an angle than just one group on the team. So yeah, that's my only ego thing, and kind of always ever was, really. When I was younger, there was always the annoyance of like, I hate being treated like the 22-year-old or the 25-year-old in the room, even though I absolutely need to be and deserve to be treated like the 25-year-old in the room. So I kept my mouth shut quite a bit in business. But I think once I passed like early 30s, I was both a little calmer, because, you know, you get a little wiser as you get older, but also much more of an asshole, because if you cross a line that I know it has nothing to do with my age, you're just being shitty, I'll just tell you in front of everybody. So it was better and worse as I get older, I guess. I'm very quickly sprinting towards grumpy old man sitting on a front lawn telling kids to get off it.
Just embrace it, man. It's nice to, it's actually nicer to be, because I'm 48 this year, so only a couple of years on you, but it's nicer when you do actually be a bit older, because people will just say to you, you're just a grumpy old dude. And you're like, nailed it. My passport's been stamped. I can just be a grumpy old dude now. I'm not just a grumpy asshole. That sort of thing, you know? So, I mean, I guess hearing that now, and I guess the goal of this, these conversations is for me to meet people, but also for anybody who's listening to get an insight into, you know, more behind what you're doing and what the content is, and I guess the real motivation. And the more I hear about you in this situation, the more I understand the conversations you have. Like for example, you were putting that Super Famicom into that shell, and the cartridge slot was a little bit out, and, you know, it was a standoff things. And you sort of mentioned people, there's some people that are happy just to go, well, this is wrong, but it's pretty. And that's a very sort of biased, you know, result. But, you know, you're the kind of person where you go, well, this stamps not quite right, but who am I to judge? I mean, there might be other models that require that stamp to be lower. And this flap, you know, it's a pre-production unit. Maybe this will come good. But at the end of it, you were like, but isn't this amazing? And then the other side of it is you sort of saying, gee, it's pretty, but functionally, this is a disaster. And I guess by being open and honest every time, anybody that's going to approach you either to learn or to request your assistance with promoting their product, or just saying, hey, this is really rad, can you just let the world know? They know what they're going to get. There's no bullshit.
Yeah. So I understood what you were saying, but in case anybody's listening and
of course,
that the first half of what you said is true, but that whole like, oh, this thing's a disaster, you were referencing something else.
Correct.
Game Restore case is awesome. I love those.
Yeah, and
I would change one or two small things about it, but that type of understanding and patience comes from two things. First, doing that yourself, because if you're on the other side of that and you watch a reviewer be like, well, how stupid is this? The standoff is too short. And you're like, it's because every other model but that one needs it short, you moron. Like, you know, so being on the other side, I understand, but also because of the people where I forgot that treated me with patience. There's one person who basically invented a bunch of cool stuff 10 years ago that still holds up. And I was doing a review of the product and I was basically like, I don't know why, but I think I must have been in a pissy mood, but I did kind of a negative review and then I sent it to them and I'm like, I've been trying to contact you for weeks. I got your product. Will you please watch the video? Or at first it was, you know, could you please answer some questions? Could you please? And I just sent the video. I was like, look, this is going live on Monday. I would love your feedback, but if I don't get it, it's just going live. It's a product that's out there. There's no NDA. If it's been out for 10 years, I don't have to get your permission. And they emailed back a couple hours later, like, sorry, you know, I had family stuff. And could we jump on a Skype call? I was like, all right. And they patiently for about an hour walked me through every one of the criticisms. And some of them were valid. Some of them were just, hey, 10 years ago, that's awesome. Today, it's not bad, but we've learned so much more, so do it this way. So that's cool. I was kind of right in that. But there was a couple where I was like, I can't believe I almost criticized you publicly for that. That it was absolutely the smart decision. I should have known better. I don't know if I was in a bad mood. And they had every right to be like, hey, fatty, fuck you. I invented some of this stuff. Who the hell are you? They had every right. They had earned the right to say that. And they didn't. They just patiently talked with me and explained it through. And it, you know, the tone of the review changed. The end conclusion is the exact same. And 10 years ago, this was the greatest possible thing you could imagine for this little niche. Today, it's still awesome, but here's the things I'd like to change about it. So it was still positive. It was still happy, but the overall tone had completely shifted to more of like, look what they accomplished back when no one else had even thought of doing this. So that really sat with me. And I just, you know, what I would say joking with my friends privately who know that I'm just being silly is completely different than I would ever say publicly because of stuff like that. And it just, you know, you got to fall hard and really like, you got to screw up to really learn that lesson. So it's one that I think I've been much better at. And of course, there's always the agree to disagree, and that's fine too. You know, we could have difference of opinions. The only time I
goals
don't
are
do
always
that
different.
is,
I mean, some people.
The only time I won't do that is when there's a measurement, right? Like that's a zero lag device. No, this is 45 milliseconds of latency measured 3 different ways. Period. You know, there's no other way to look at this. So
it's odd. It must be challenging. I think there might be, now again, to clarify, the disaster thing wasn't about the clear Super Famicom shells. I think I was thinking about maybe like an N64 thing that came out a while back, and I think generally it was embraced as a fairly like sort of thing, but it like aesthetically, you know, sometimes things just, you look at them and you go, wow, that's kind of cool, but in the end, whether there be some shielding issues or things just don't line up and stuff. And it's interesting. It must be interesting for you to kind of have to still embrace the fact that these people were trying to make something aesthetically amazing, like really gorgeous, but totally failed in all these other areas. And how do you kind of walk away saying, well, that's great, but you've missed the mark, without, like you said, coming off as a total arsehole? And then there's other things that come across as, this thing works amazing, but I don't know, the box you served it up in is could do with some work. So there's always different angles of where you're coming from.
Like the HD Retrovision cables. So the best cables you could ever buy that used to come in a clear baggie, like a 1 cent clear baggie. I have no problem making fun of them for that because they're in boxes now and everything. But you know, you have to just be okay with being an asshole. And it's just one of those things. I never fit in anywhere growing up. I always had a couple of friends in each group. I was never a member of a tribe, which is why it's so easy for me to be the middleman, because I never feel like I have to take somebody's side. But you know, it's just, for me, the intent. I mean, I guess you could say this about how I look at all of life, but intent is such a huge factor in a lot of these things. You know, like somebody goes out and they try their absolute best and they get it out there and it's not as good, but it's not dangerous. It's just not as good as other stuff, you know, but maybe it's got one cool feature. Like I'm politely honest about all of that. And I know it's not going to sell a lot after my review, but everybody knows to pay attention to these people, because it's like, hey, they're trying their best. It's not, you know, it might not be the most perfect product, but let's see what they come up with next. But it's the people that are like the one notorious situation from a couple of years ago where I reached out to somebody that didn't clone a board that I was involved in, but like they basically did the exact same thing themselves and to purposely undercut. So right off the bat, it's like, it's fair, but kind of douchey. And then I contacted them and pointed out, like, hey, you built it wrong. It's not dangerous. It's not going to blow anybody's console up, but here's, you know, the 5, 6, 7 things that are going to be a result that when people install it, a lot of them are going to complain, not everybody. And the response was, yeah, you're right. I'll just dump these off on eBay and then make some more. I'm like,
oh, wow.
You giant piece of shit.
Yeah.
You started out with this by saying you made 1,000 of them to get them cheaper. You did no QA, and now you're going to sell 1,000 of them on eBay purposely to rip people off to make money. So people like that, I have no problem exposing that, because the intent was to screw people over. So maybe they were going through something bad. Maybe they're wonderful humans. This one wasn't. There's been a history of this person ripping people off ever since too. But
right.
So that's why one of these things where if the intent is so clear, I don't lose a wink of sleep. Whereas like if I make the smallest mistake about something where it's good people and a good product, or heck, even the one time I got something wrong on a Hyperkin product that was 99% garbage, and I said one other feature of it was wrong and I was wrong, like I lose sleep over that. Even though that last example is a little ridiculous because it's a junk product anyway, but like it's, you know, I guess I could say I get emotional about it when I do something really right or really wrong, and I see other people do the same. And whenever you have somebody that's an awesome human that makes an awesome product that's at the right price that everybody could buy, like I get super excited about that, to the point where a lot of people think I'm shilling or paid to do an ad. But the truth is, I'm just like, hey, this is the trifecta, the perfect storm of, you know, of everything cool that you could find in a small niche product.
It's interesting. I hear that term. I think you use it a bit too, because you're kind of obviously having to be not defensive, but you got to kind of remind people, call me a shill. I kind of don't give a shit. And like at the end of the day, it's tricky, because like if the way everything's getting cancelled and people cry and, oh, this Metroid wasn't good enough and blah, 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 and forgetting that real humans are part of the process. It wasn't just created by a robot. But you know, if you're someone like yourself, like anybody can look at it and go, this dude punches out a video every 2 days or 3 days or a week or whatever. There's a lot of work here. He can't be doing it for free. Therefore, he's making money. And if he's going to be getting products in, if he's being encouraged to review them, that's not shilling. That's just giving an opinion. And I think based on your content, the fact that you're so evenly, positive and negative, like I don't know that I've watched quite a few of your videos, but I don't think I've ever watched you ever say, this is the perfect product. There's always going to be something.
Nothing ever is.
That's right. That's right. And
especially as nerds, no nerd has ever been, this is the perfect product. And that's actually another sign of the people that I work with, who are all just awesome people. I'm so lucky to be able to do all this stuff. But Mike Chi sends me the next greatest retro tank, and I start testing it. I'm like, I love it. Can you do this, that, and the other thing? He doesn't go, how dare you question the product? He goes, cool. Let's talk about that. Let's see if it's worth it. Let's see if it's, if I could do it. Like, it's one of those things where people are always excited to push themselves even farther. And, that's what gets me really excited. And that's why I don't feel bad when I'm like, this is awesome. I'd like to see this too. But hey, maybe that'll be Rev 2 or another firmware update or something else.
Yeah. So sort of getting put all that to a side a bit. Let's talk maybe a little bit more about you as a collector and a gamer, like just enjoying. And I often fear that people like yourself, like anybody that buys a PVM, for example, can no longer enjoy just a normal CRT.
I disagree completely.
Well, I mean, sometimes. I mean, I think Maybe I didn't word that correctly. You can still enjoy one, but I
you
think
could get more obsessed with how you tweak the PVM than you do playing the game on the PVM. That's absolutely for sure. But no, the one thing I always say, and I always felt this way, but it was actually my friend Artemio who really politely got the point across to me that, make sure I say what's the best for you. The point that I always was trying to make is, here's 10 awesome ways to play old games. Here's the best way to play it on a CRT. Here's the best way to play on a flat panel. But I didn't really do a good job at first with here's what you need and here's what you could upgrade to if you care at all. And for me, it's, any CRT that still works and doesn't have burn in is awesome, and I love it. And there's so many different types and there's so many different advantages. Like if you're playing a light gun game, especially one of the later ones like a Dreamcast or Saturn or something, 480i on a 36-inch TV, like consumer grade TV CRT, is so much fun because you get this big screen, and 480i, there's no crazy flicker because it's it's on the display that was meant to do that. But I would take that over like that same Dreamcast light gun game in 480p on like a perfectly calibrated 14-inch BVM, because while it's sharper and higher resolution, progressive scan, calibrated, everything looks cool, like the experience is just different. Like when it comes to light gun games, I want to blast away at a giant screen, not aim at a tiny little monitor. And things like N64, I still to this day think a 14-inch monitor with just anything, composite, RGB, whatever, I think that an N64 on that looks better than some of the higher end solutions. But I mean, everybody's eyes are different. So I just think there's so many cool different ways to experience this. And for me personally, and how I play them is whatever is the easiest way that I could play it. And now that I've moved and I'm setting up a new a new CRT wall with stuff like that, like I'm deliberately not wiring every CRT because I don't want this to be a never-ending project. I kind of want to shuffle some few things around. I'm working with Steve from RetroTech to get a newer CRT in here, and I want to make two main displays so that I could walk over, flip on my power adapter, flip on whatever console, and choose one of the two displays depending on whatever, and that's it. And that's the goal. But for now, it's whatever's the easiest method to play that doesn't have any lag.
I totally appreciate that. And like I said, I've sort of been on the precipice of doing this or buying that, and watched, your videos or someone else's, and it's kind of gone, should I do that? And then in the end, I've got like a couple of like just 4-in, 1-out AV switches. I've got a couple of them daisy chained together, basically. So, half of them are kind of going through twice. And then out of those is the RCA cables are literally just split via wire adapters from my 29-inch Trinitron to my 14-inch little NEC. So it's like the most rudimentary, probably
for audio or for video.
For both.
You're slowly killing your consoles doing that.
Yeah, I mean, but this is what I mean.
Pull the Y cable off for video because you'll burn out your consoles within a year or two.
Oh, really?
If you keep doing it that way. Yeah, you're putting twice the current draw on it. Audio, it's fine. Right. Audio, you might get buzz. People get really pissed at me when I say it's fine when you do that with audio. Yeah. From a safety point of view, it's fine. You might get some buzz or hum, but from video, it's bad. This isn't one of those things where your console would have lasted 50 more years. Now it'll last 49. Like if you keep it up, it'll die anywhere between tomorrow and next year, probably. I've killed a Super Nintendo that way for a demo.
Does it matter if only one of the screens are on at a time? Because that would be normally how I
depends on the circuitry of the TV. So it could end up being a tiny bit dimmer, but not kill the console. But it depends on the circuitry of the TV.
Okay, so I need to just put like a output switcher between the two screens on that last point.
If you're using composite video, you could get either powered dual output switches, or you can get video distribution amplifiers, which, like, if you went into any of like the Circuit Cities back in the day, Best Buy, that had one thing powering all the TVs, stuff like that is what they would use. And I mean, they used to be thousands, and you can get them for like $20 now. A decent one.
All right. Well, even at my rudimentary level, there's always that little step up just to kind of make things a little bit more pleasant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the safety stuff is the only stuff I would push people towards. Quality, totally up to you. Doesn't make any when you're talking about CRTs, there's zero difference in the game experience other than your eyes might like it better. It's only when you get into flat panels where it just by coincidence, very often quality goes hand in hand with lag or flickery processing or something like that. If it was one of those things where it was a zero lag solution that looked like crap, fine. It's not as good as on a CRT still, but at least up till today, getting the better solution doesn't just mean better quality. It means you're dropping a lot of lag. You're dropping the flickery mess that happens with some of those plug and play cables.
Yeah, cool. All right. I'll unplug that other screen immediately and then source a solution. Thank you. Free little bit of information there.
Sorry to shoot down your setup on your own podcast there.
No, that's totally fine. I'm like you said, I'm happy to be wrong. I mean, sort of going back to that, I work with sort of telecommunications and stuff, and sometimes you can be stuck on one piece of equipment for like 4 or 5 days when it should have been 3 hours. And everybody's like, man, what a doozy. And in the end, after about 3 or 4 days, I'm kind of like, all right, anybody is welcome to walk up and just resolve this. I need to get on with my life. So yeah, I have zero ego, especially when stuff I don't know what I'm talking about. That's okay. Yeah. So as a gamer, I mean, where does your love lie? Are you one of these PlayStation people? I mean, you cover so much, so I can't imagine.
So I grew up. My childhood, my favorite stuff was the 16-bit era. I had an NES when I was 9 years old or something like that, and I loved it. But it was still at that point where you had to use your imagination for a lot of stuff. So games like DuckTales, it's a perfect example of an awesome game that doesn't ever need anything more than the original. But it still was at that point where you're kind of pretending a square as a character for a lot of these things. And then it was that transition over to the 16-bit era where you had to use your imagination less about the graphics and the effects and just get sucked into the games. And some people disagree. There's no right or wrong answer, but that was it for me. And some of my favorite style of games, like 2D exploration side scrollers, like that, that was the era of those, so it's kind of those. I don't know if it's a nostalgia thing. I don't know if it's a lazy old man thing that I haven't enjoyed some of the newer styles as much because I have to learn something new, but that's just always been my favorite. And I've tried them all. I've tried every style of game, and those are kind of my favorites. So the 2D adventure games are cool, but a lot of times, they're just, you have to just practice over and over and over. Whereas like the exploration style, like exploring the game is the practice that you need. So you don't have to play the same area over 100 times.
Yeah.
So that's why I like the Metroids, Axiom Verge, Ori games, all of those are just my favorite style.
Yeah. Do you are you the type to have a lot of cartridges and stuff, or are you more of sort of like hardware is more your thing? Because I assume you have a lot of flash cards.
Yeah, so I have this thing where if I really love a game, I really want to buy it within reason. So if it's a game, like if I decided Musha was my favorite Genesis game, I'm not spending $500 or $800 on that. Just forget it. No one's losing money because I decided not to buy that game.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
If I find a classic game that I like, I just really want it. And it's stupid because I'll probably still play it on the flash cart or play it on the Mister, but I just want to know that I have that game that I like. So I don't have a huge collection, especially coming from New York City. Just nobody has the room for a huge collection, but I have a very nicely curated collection to my tastes, I guess.
Yeah. I noticed. Was it just recently you were at an expo or something, or a convention of some sort?
Yeah, last weekend, Retro World Expo. It's my favorite expo. The team that ran it.
What's the general gist behind it, and how was it this year, considering the last few years of everybody's been sort of out of rhythm?
Yeah, so it's this typical retro gaming expo, in that you walk in and there's a ton of different vendors that you could buy stuff, anywhere from retro game stores setting up booths to artists to people that just make random cool stuff. And then they have content creators that kind of hang out there, have their booths and do meet and greets and stuff. And then there's always like the auctions, the cosplay contests, which if you're into that, cool. There was live wrestling matches this year, which was so random and so awesome. Yeah, like they didn't treat it like, oh, we're going to go to an expo and put on a show. They went in. They went
Wow.
in like, yeah, it was. Then I appreciate the heck out of that so much, because from playing gigs for music, like I've been, I don't care if the only people in the room was the bartender. If I'm not giving it my all, I shouldn't be there.
Yeah,
Period.
yeah, nice.
So like I always have so much respect for people that have that same attitude of like, maybe they're here to see us, maybe not, but whatever. And they did gain a crowd. When the wrestling match started, there was a handful of people, and by the time it was ended, like half the place was like, what the hell's going on? And it was
right.
They got a crowd, so it was cool. And there's always the panels where you get to hear people talk and stuff like that.
Was there any kind of like, I don't know, SNES WWF link to the wrestling, or was it just like, hey, who remembers wrestling? And they just threw it in there.
Well, they had the wrestler Tatanka there. So that was like the main connection, I guess. But I just think there's a pretty big crossover. Like the Too Many Games Expo has, always has bands there. And they had a band I like a lot, actually, Psycho Stick, the last time I was there. So it was kind of fun to see. So I guess, a lot of these expos try to cross genres a bit, and sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. But this one was awesome. And, I was honestly really afraid, excuse me, drinking beer here. I was afraid that no one would show up because of, people might be nervous or something like that. And I brought my friends Destiny and Beast. Both already have an established following in that. But I don't think Beast had presented with me at an expo before, but it wasn't a very high traffic one. I don't think Destiny had presented at a retro gaming expo. I know she's done cosplay stuff. So I kept telling them, like, I have no idea how many people are going to show up. 2 years ago, it was jam-packed. So I'm sorry if it's a waste of your time. And man, I had nothing to worry about. Day one was packed, constant stream of people. And day two was slower, but day two is always slower on all of these. So it wasn't, I don't think it was related to anything. So it was cool. I was really, really happy and grateful that it all went the way it did.
And so did you say you were presenting?
We did. We had like the meet and greet booth that we hung out at. And then we also, we all did one presentation together just about like the state of retro gaming these days. And basically from the last expo to this one. And then I jumped on Lon Seidman's panel about the Mister. Which was kind of like, Lon's a great guy, but I don't remember exactly how I got on that panel. I think it was like, oh, I hear you're doing another Mr. panel. He was like, oh yeah, you want to do it with me? Like, yeah, sure. And like 5 minutes later, I'm up on stage or something. So it was cool. But Lon's awesome, does great videos. So I had, I'd done a panel with him about that a few years earlier. So I knew that was going to go well.
Yeah, the Mister's one of those things I can't kind of get my head around. I guess when I was on the Raspberry Pi, I probably would have graduated into that world eventually, and FPGA and that sort of stuff. But I guess since I got consoles and flash cards for each one, or an ODE, then it's like I just stopped. And I guess I can remember when I sort of first was going from emulation into actual like hardware. And, I'd meet a few people like, oh, I'm glad you're getting out of emulation. Like, oh, geez. And I kind of never really bought into it. And now I'm always like, I mean, in a fashion, because I'm using flashcards, I'm still not buying cartridges, because I'm like you. I'm like, I don't need it. I can play it. And I would rather someone who wants to pay $500 for that game, if they need it in their collection, then go for it. And like you said, the only person that's not getting the money is the person who's charging an exceptional amount for it. But yeah, I think there's definitely, just as a general punter, the way that sort of things like FPGA and Mr. sort of coming around, and there's a lot more push for what do you call it, like preservation as opposed to piracy, and that's what I'm enjoying,
because a lot of people are dropping the P word because it's the popular thing to say. It's like anything else in life, right? This is not at all related to retro gaming. It's just some people will take the opportunity to steal the spotlight from the other people that are actually working on the real thing that they're trying to talk about. And that you could apply that to anything in life. And there are very good people out there who are genuinely putting some insane efforts into making sure not only the software is preserved, but the manuals, the artwork, it's one thing to see a ROM labeled, Super Mario 2, than it is to grab the box and see what, imagine what that was like as a kid, pre-internet, to walk into a store and this is your deciding factor. It's always hilarious seeing the Master System games too. Like
Oh,
as
the
a kid,
checkered
like
boxes.
yeah, a whole bunch of checkerboard boxes. Which one with the different writing am I
Yeah.
going to buy?
With a
I'm
cartoon of
convinced that's why.
the soccer's
Yeah,
like a cartoon of a foot and a ball, and you're like, oh, I guess that's about soccer then.
right. Yeah, that's probably why they didn't do as well. So
Mm.
the real people out there putting the preservation efforts, I have so much gratitude to, and I try to support all of them, and especially stuff like, I know I sound like a broken record for anybody that listens to the podcast, but when people do these Japanese to English translations,
Mm.
like, that is so much work. That is
Yeah.
so much painstaking work.
Yeah.
And you know, it's it's a little frustrating when you see people like, that's awesome, now do this one, where it's like they
Yeah.
mean well, they don't mean any insults by that. That's a
Mm.
compliment because they like your work. But like, I wish more people would take a moment to just take a deep breath and realize what goes into these
Mm.
translations, because I always try to sing them praise, and I miss a lot. I try to cover as much as I can on the website, but we're a small group of people. But yeah, the real preservationists, sometimes they get no love, and I wish they did.
Yeah, I agree. And there's always going to be someone who, I don't know, maybe they know that just enough. Say if it's a Japanese to English translation, and then they know just enough about Japanese, and they happen to hit on a bit that's like their perception of a Western white guy and how they learn Japanese. Oh, that's not quite right. Where you change it to cat, I should say kitten. And it's like, come on, dude. This is a 40 hour game, and you're pulling me up on kitten. So those people are brave because they're like, I'm doing it. There's going to be 60 people that are going to go, you did this, and this wrong. But you can tell that they're sincere because they're like, it's just water off a duck's back to them. Like, I'm here to translate. I'm not here to
Yeah.
play those games.
So when you read those comments are a giant factor in how, at least I don't want to speak for anybody else, but for me personally, when I read those comments are how I respond, because there's been countless times where I'll do a 40-hour video that's legit, like every waking moment for a week, on top of the other RetroRGB stuff I do, where I kind of just beg the other writers to hey, could you do these four for me this week, please, and I got to do this stuff. And then if comment number one is, hey, you misspelled Mario, like, go fuck yourself. Are you serious? Like, that's your. Whereas like if 2 days went by, I'd be like, oh no, I can't believe I did. That's funny. Let's have a laugh about that. Like, it's not their fault. It is not their fault for commenting on that, and and choosing to, especially the ones that try to be silly. That's my fault for reacting like that. But you just like, when you're at wit's end after stuff like that, you can't really see the other side of it. You're just like, that's what you're commenting on, nothing else. You don't even have other. So I can only imagine what it's like to be a translator and go through that too, especially because every language has so many different dialects to it. I was just hanging out with somebody from deep south of America, and they say words, almost every word out of their mouth sounds different than mine. And a lot of the slang sounds different.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you're a translator trying to figure out what they're trying to say, so you're mixing the slang of the time, you're mixing their accent, you're mixing, like, it's, I couldn't, I don't think I have it in me to do that.
It was the all your bases are belong to us. I think it's sort of like the beginning of, from then on, the whole world went, okay, this will be fun. That's cool.
Yeah, that one's pretty funny. But even stuff like Amazon ads, it's like, can't you just hire somebody here? There's got to be people here that work for hourly rates that translate. But
yeah, right. Have you traveled internationally much?
funny, I was the little poor kid that never went anywhere, and then I got the job where I was on the design team for computers, and like week number 2, they're like, go get a passport, you're going to Taiwan. So
Right.
I did get the opportunity to travel the world on the company's dime, which was even nicer. But
Outstanding. And
I love it.
were you kind of sort of retro gaming and stuff there? Did you take advantage of those visits and bring back gems and
No,
nuggets
like
and
around
stuff?
late high school time, I decided guitar and beer and chicks were more exciting to me than anything else in the world. And then I got corporate jobs, and just got so busy with life. I never fell out altogether, but like, I would buy a gaming console, I'd play some games, but I wasn't as absorbed in it as I used to be. And because I traveled, I used to play a lot on the handheld consoles, so the Game Boy Advance and DS. And then the Wii came out, and I started playing the virtual console, and it was neat, but something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it. So I got controller adapters, which was okay. I didn't realize at the time the one I was using had like 3 frames of lag. So I was like, okay, it sort of feels better and it sort of doesn't. And then that's when I just decided, let me grab some old consoles and grab an AV cart and an old CRT TV, which at the time, over 10 years ago, everybody I knew had one in their basement. And I wired it all up and I was like, all right, I'm done. Now when I want to play an old game, I have this neat little thing. And then I just was, insomnia one night. I've had that forever. I was just staring at the ceiling. I went, I remember being in a game store in the 90s and somebody there mentioned RGB. I wonder what that's like. So and then that started RetroRGB. I was like, I want to play all these old consoles with the best quality output.
Right.
And nobody had any info. It was a bunch of scattered info across forums, and more than half the info I stumbled across was wrong. Not even like your opinion is different than mine. I mean, wrong. So I started compiling all of this info into a Google Doc that I thought 3 or 4 of my friends might be interested in. And my cousin one time was just like, why don't you make it a website? And there's RetroRGB.
Right. That's interesting. So what, you'd not really played with oscilloscopes or measuring lag on screens or any of that sort of stuff. That was kind of where it began, just kicking around. And then and so the knowledge that you have, because you do have, even though you say everybody around you is a bit smarter, you've obviously taken enough of this knowledge to confidently, discuss it and talk about it. This is all
I'm paying attention when those smart people talk.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. This is all very much self-taught, hey.
Yeah, but I had such a deep technical background. Like I had to sit in, at 27 or something, I had to sit in a design room in, at MSI Computer in Taiwan, surrounded by people that design the things that I use and hold my own. So it's like, you got to learn quick and you got to pick up around you quickly, and you got to be able to adapt to the environment. So when I switched from one type of design work to the retro gaming type, it was a very easy transition, because it's the same thing. It's, here's something rooted in hardware technology, which it's been a huge part of me my whole life. It's just a little different than the way I did it for my day job. So that ended up being a very easy transition.
Yeah, I get a sense that you've got your finger in a couple of different pies. Was there ever a point when you were kind of like thinking, I'm here, I could be there, and maybe you would go down that similar path, but just in that sort of retro gaming? Because you deal with a lot of people that are doing kind of what you used to do, but on a small, more personal scale. Did you ever feel like maybe I should just go down the hardware kind of, but just retro gaming?
So this is going to sound really bad. I hope people understand. I hope people give me the benefit of the doubt and take it the right way. But I kind of made a decision a while back that if I was going to do anything but this, I would go back to doing some of the stuff that would make me so much more money than I'm making now. So if I had the choice of doing something that's not retro RGB, do I want to continue to work minimum 50 hours a week, but usually more like that, or a lot more than that, on a project that might make me more money, that I'm taking a huge risk on? Or do I want to call up some of my old bosses and my old colleagues and say, hey, I'm back, can you find me a job? And I could, slip into a cushy 40 to 50 hour a week maximum job where, with benefits and, and bonuses and stuff like that. And it's like, you don't care about money till you don't have any. And then suddenly it's much more important than you realized. So yeah, I've considered doing a lot of that. But for me personally, unless a huge project got funded and they actually needed me, which, no one needs me from an intelligence perspective. I would be calling smarter people, but it's just from the like, hey, Bob, you've already worked with these 10 developers and we need to help them to do this. Like, if they needed me, I would help, but I think I would just continue doing retro RGB.
Yeah. Is there a goal for retro RGB? I mean, is there a, well, I don't take you as I need 10 million subscribers or my income needs to be this, because I mean, it just what it is. But is there kind of like a goal on, like, because I think sometimes people either run out of steam or they kind of overreach a bit and then can't, sort of the same thing, can't deliver and keep the world interested.
Yeah, so the goal for retro RGB has always, from day one, been make it not about me, make it about the community, make sure that this is, I never introduce myself as retro RGB. I'm always Bob from retro RGB. And the end goal has always been find a way to make this live on past. and we're starting that with the wiki soon. There's a couple other delays that are positive and rooted in positivity, but that is going to be anybody can contribute anything involving gaming, computers, like anything retro hardware. You could start adding to this wiki. It will be hosted for free forever. As long as I'm alive and a couple of people that I know that I'm connected to are alive, it will be hosted for free, and anybody can contribute. And there's no ads and no opinions, like just the facts. This is like an archival thing. And I'm trying to find a way to do something with RetroRGB in a similar vein. But, then it comes back to something I don't, unlike what I just said, something I don't feel guilty about is I have to figure out how to pay my mortgage. I can't just give it all away and then say I'm going to go on unemployment. Like,
contrary to the horror of some people, it's like, what? I'm going to pay for this.
Yeah, but those people have never worked a day in their life, so their opinion means nothing to me. The only people, I mean, that's a pompous thing to say, but it's the truth. If you are 35 years old, in your parents' basement, you have no say in my life, and I don't really care. Yeah. You could have more friends on Twitter who'd be willing to troll me, and that's fine. You've won Twitter. I hope you enjoy looking at your win in your parents' basement while you make no money. And, nobody in their right mind criticizes that. It's especially the way I bend over backwards to do it, because it's like a lot of people take sponsorships. I would, as long as it wasn't for stuff that I reviewed. So like I was just talking in the live stream today, like I love this screwdriver. I am not sponsored at all, but I will absolutely drop an affiliate link to this screwdriver, so if you like it too, you could buy it. And stuff like that is how I pay the bills. But and if Black & Decker wanted to sponsor me, I'm right here, Black & Decker. But I would never take a sponsor from like Retro Gamer Store, like the awesome person that runs that. And if you ever said, if I paid you $5,000, would you give my thing a good review? Like, no, absolutely not. That's counterproductive in every possible way. So it's just figuring out how to get all that stuff done. But if I could figure out a way to somehow do this, or if I end up going back to getting a corporate job, I would love to find a way to turn RetroRGB over to everybody. But that's complicated.
It'd be hard too after doing it your way and seeing it go down a certain sort of flavor and then just going.
I would have zero ego about that.
Right.
The only thing that I would be pissed about is if I ever turned the site over and then 3 months jumped on and it was just one big ad for Viagra. So it's like, somebody just, took the Google Analytics, exploited it and did that. That's where my ego kicks in big time. But if it was just if it was still a very positive hub where, not a drama thing, I would just be happy for it.
Mm-hmm. You've mentioned a few times, trying to sort of handball articles and work to other writers and stuff. So do you effectively work as staff, or I don't want to get too much into it, but I guess some people might be interested in knowing, man, I would love to write articles. I would, I kind of know what I'm doing and I think I could contribute and I love where they're going. So in your position, how does that kind of, I guess, for lack of a better term, how does that kind of hierarchy work as far as RetroRGB goes?
There really isn't so much a hierarchy. That all the people that contribute do so because they love this stuff, and sometimes it's because they have an opinion they want to share that's based on a lot of work and experience and effort. And other times it's just, oh, hey, I heard that this new project's coming out, I'd like to write about it to promote this. Yeah, of course. And it's basically people who have this as one of their hobbies because they love it and they just want to help contribute. And as a favor, as a friend, sometimes I'll be like, can anybody help? I'm drowning here. But there is no staff, there is no hierarchy. It's just volunteers who do this because they love it. And they see my intentions are in the right place, so they don't mind helping me out on this site versus maybe somebody else's.
Yeah, cool. It must be tricky though for you to kind of filter through, because obviously to be, I guess, like a source of news and information, it must be tricky for you to kind of, you're kind of panning for gold. And even though this isn't a nugget, you're like, gee, I wish I could squeeze out an extra 4 hours to kind of nut something out there for that. But then again, you're paying attention. And if it comes back up a second time, you're like, okay, now it's worth giving it that more time.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I'm never going to be massively successful in this, in that if I wanted to make this a true business that I made money on that I grew as a conglomerate that I could sell, I would be spending my time figuring out which articles make the most money, which subjects are trending, and I do zero of that. When stuff comes in front of me, it's holy crap, there's a pre-order that opens in 20 minutes. Let me get this post up right now so people know where to get it, why they should get it, what's the alternatives. Or it's, here's a project that I think's amazing. And some of the video capture video I did, I must have spent, hundreds of hours on getting all that info together, getting the pages on the website together. And I think like 200 or 300 people really appreciate it.
Yeah, right.
But so that's in the numbers of the internet, that's useless. That if you were the corporate boardroom and you did that analysis, you'd fire me for that. Whereas it's like, no, this needed to be out there. This is important. The people on the R3 wiki are absolutely killing it. Awesome humans, but like none of them have put it into a video form and a website quite this way. So here's my take on it. Credited them the whole time. And it's something that a lot of people have messaged me about. Like, hey, I always wondered why my capture setup did this. Hey, I'm trying to make archival videos that are, really truly representative to what it was like to play these. Thanks for putting this up. And, so the fact that not many people really give a shit meant nothing to me, because it was very important to me to do. So that's why I'll always be broke doing this stuff, because I don't do that filter to the masses. It's the hardest thing is when I have like 5 things that I really want to write about, and I'm an expert in one of them. I sort of kind of know about 2, and I have no idea the details of the other 2, but I kind of know it's important. Those are the ones that drive me nuts, because they so often get fallen through the cracks. And that's why I'm so lucky to have a bunch of people who are willing to donate their time, because we have like a little post queue thing that we drop links into. Yeah. And there's been multiple times where somebody's like, oh, I already know all about that project. I'm like, awesome. You got to write it up, because you'd have the passion to do it justice,
Yeah. Would you say that the people that you're dealing with, creating things for RetroRGB, would you say is a fairly wide sort of age group? Like, are you in a position to
I'm both proud and embarrassed to say that we have the most diverse crew in all of retro gaming. Right. But I'm embarrassed to say that because that was never the intention. And it's never my intention in life ever. It's just like, hey, do you like this stuff? Are you good at it? Or do I like hanging out with you? Come on in. And that's the prerequisites to be a writer at RetroRGB. Are you decent at what you do? Do you have love for it? And do we all get along? And that's it. That's the only prerequisites, which is the exact same way that I choose who I like to be friends with. Am I happy around you? Cool. I don't really give a shit about anything else. But it's funny that accidentally we ended up with the most diverse staff I've seen. I don't want to say staff because none of us works for each other, but
I probably dropped that term
in all of retro gaming. I haven't really seen anything. And the perspective differences so often shine through in the smallest but like very coolest ways. And like the ages, the experience, where your background's from. Because while I just said like I don't really give a shit what the differences are, like every human has their own unique things that they bring based on however they've lived their life. So it's very cool to read some of the articles and to hear like somebody with such a strong passion and love for certain retro computers that I've never even seen. But when I read their article, it's like, I totally understand why this is important. I've never heard of this thing until I started the article, but I get it now. So yeah, I can't even begin to say how happy and grateful I am that people are willing to contribute like that. It's very cool to see the different perspectives.
That's neat, isn't it? And because you're not managing an office that's got 6 people sitting down writing articles on 6 ways to make your cat like gaming, or all that kind of stupid shit, you're able to just enjoy the humanity of people that enjoy something and tick along. And sometimes you just need that thing in your life to go, shit is pretty cool, this is really good fun. Yeah.
Or people who just take the time to jump in and be like, the new thing goes on sale tomorrow. Like a lot of time, like I always bring that up when we do the writers podcasts, and like, very often I'll talk about a post somebody wrote that I loved, that I just thought changed my perspective on a small thing, a MIDI module for Mr. whatever it might be. Like, but I always try to give props for the people that just do the quick 1.5 paragraph, like here's the new product, or new batch on sale, because taking the time to do that, like, you're not going to be the hero to retro gaming saying
No.
new batch of retro tanks is going to be up tomorrow, but taking the time to do that helps so many people. So I try to always make sure to give all the contributors props for the little stuff like that, because taking the time to do that helps a lot, and it's kind of thankless, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the type of post where if you get it perfect, no one will ever thank you, and if you misspell a word, people will tease you about it, and it's like,
yeah. Look, I mean, I've got some experience in the workshop I'm in, and I would probably be very much like one of the two sort of older guys amongst about a dozen guys. And if you kind of hand me a broom at sort of 2:00 on a Thursday and go, can you just give the joint a bit of a sweep up? I'd be like, sure. But you try and hand a broom to some people, they're like, I work on radios, I don't sweep. It's like, it's still your cookie crumbs, like everybody's got to be willing to just pick up the broom and just do those little bits and pieces, and you have your day. So it's out there.
It's very cool that the crew that writes, that I don't think they look at it as that. I agree with what you said, but I think it's awesome that I don't think any of them look at it as like, fine, I'll sweep up the crumbs. Like, I think they're just like, oh, cool, I know about this. Let me get to it real quick.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, cool. It's interesting to sort of see it, just to get behind the curtain with you a little bit, because it's very easy to kind of, when your feed gets a bit sort of full of this person giving their opinion of that and this person giving their opinion of that, and to try and find somewhere that I feel like, even before we have this discussion, there's a definite sort of genuineness that comes through in your presentation, and for me it's even more interesting to see that behind you is other people that are like-minded and all. You just happen to be that sort of, like you said, I'm Bob from RetroRGB, I'm not RetroRGB, and I think the more people that you feel are out there in the world being positive, the better it is. If you see one guy being great, you're like, well, that's one guy. But when there's multiple guys and girls out there doing it, it gives you a feeling of like, when you're with the community, whether it be retro gaming or organic gardening or whatever, the more people you see being happy about it, I think it enhances your own experience. And I think it's really important to be able to give the support and the money to people that are actually deserving, as opposed to the asshole that has been pointed out quite graciously, this is not going to work. Oh, that's okay, I'll just dump 1,000 on eBay and move on with my life. Like, we don't want to see those people profit. We want them to learn their lesson and come out the other side as a better person. But at the same time, it shouldn't be to the
just go away.
Or just go. But it shouldn't be the detriment of potentially 1,000 other people. Like, that's just bullshit.
Yeah, and I will say that I'm very proud that I have very relieved that I've gotten the chance to meet a lot of the bigger players, both behind the scenes and in front of the camera, and most are just awesome humans. And not everybody's going to get along, right? Like, Voltar's just such a piece of shit. I'm kidding, he's a friend, we just love to tease each other, but like, some people just don't get along, and that's fine, but that doesn't make them bad people. And that's why when some of the bad stuff happens, it stands out so much, because it's not, the majority of the people in the scene really are decent people. And everybody's got their thing. Nobody's perfect, but that's why when you see the bad ones, it makes such an impact. And that's why it bugs me so much when there's a couple of, like, I'm trying to find a nice way to, like, there's a couple of imposters hiding in plain sight, where it's just like, oh, if everybody knew who you really were, it's extra gross, because there's so many awesome people around you.
Yeah. I suspect that most of the kind of the negative, I guess, results and experiences, and just people in general, are going to come from that kind of like straight out cloning rip-off type of community. Because anybody that's creating something new, I would imagine, has thought it through and thought, gee, I wish this did this, or I wish I had something that did this. And they've got the ability to either by themselves or with a crew come together and create a thing, and then accept feedback and perfect the thing and finally come out with a really good result. And most of the douchebags are going to be people like, okay, I'm going to make this smaller, I'm going to make this cheaper, I'm not going to do anything with it apart from profit. And I imagine, would that be the general reasoning behind all that, like the badness, I guess?
I mean, some of it's mental illness.
Yeah, right.
I've seen that, and I don't say that to be insulting. I'm one of
Yeah.
those people that truly hates the stigma behind it, right? If
Yeah.
you're going through something mentally, you should be able to talk about that the same way that you're like, oh, I broke my wrist. Like
Yeah.
we're all people, right?
Yeah.
But that's a chunk of what you'll see. A lot of it's just typical weird jealousy or whatever else you want to say. I've seen people start rumors about other people because they have more followers.
Mm,
It's the weirdest thing in the world to me, but like
mm.
there's a lot of factors that go involved. But cloning and stealing, excuse me, that's the no, that's my line. And it's funny because there was a couple of kind of, I don't know if they were nut jobs or bored or what, but it tried to start a rumor about me a couple years ago that I'm an elitist that only wants people to use the most expensive solutions, and
Mm.
I don't promote anybody that's not a friend of mine, one of this group of 5. And it's kind of funny because like actions speak louder than words, right? I have 10 years of experience or of proof that it's the opposite of me. But when some of the bad cloning stuff started to happen, it's kind of funny because then I did kind of get like a mental blacklist of like, okay, this person, not only did they clone, they said that they lied, or other person lied about it, and like they tripled down. And it's just like, okay, I'm never working with that person again. Like thievery, cloning, intentional thievery and cloning. I can't tell you how many times there's parallel thinking where 2 people come up with like a similar style thing.
Yeah.
And for some crazy reason, most of the times that has happened in retro gaming, it's like a high five, like, oh shit, I was doing that too. Well, how'd you do it? Well, here's how I did it.
Yeah.
You still want to make a product? Like, okay, let's figure this out. Like, it's actually been really cool, but
Right.
it's the times that aren't, it's just like, ooh, I see what your real intentions are. Like, I'm definitely not doing work with that person ever.
Yeah. Cool. Ah, well, it sounds like it's 98% awesome, and that's what I guess
Really
everybody.
is.
That's what everybody wants to hear. Everybody wants to hear that when you get something like a RetroTink or a Fandangled cable or something, or a splitter, which I need to go get, that there's been thought behind it, and it's been a positive process, and this thing's bringing this kind of like a. I mean, I have bought some products from companies that are renowned as pretty shitty. And I mean, it could even go down to, I mean, the kind of the backlash with some of the AAA gaming that have kind of, been found to have treated their developers like as really like cattle. And there's a lot of people that have turned and said, I'm an adult. I don't think I can now buy that game knowing that, 400 employees have been treated like absolute shit to get this thing into my hands. Some people don't give a rat's ass.
It's funny that you say that, because as a kid and probably through my 20s, I would have recognized how terrible the situation was, but I would have been able to separate the gaming experience from that. And as an adult, I don't think I have that in me. I think if I see somebody get treated that badly, and that blatantly badly, like this isn't this person's more sensitive than that person. Like there's very clear proof in a lot of these situations of what happened. And that I can't do it. There's one notorious game in retro gaming that everybody else loves that I can't even power on. I don't even like. I've seen what the developers done to people. I can't even do it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And we were going to make, and it is, as you get older, you do start to I mean, we're talking about, you can be the grumpy old man now, but I honestly believe as I get older, I become more understanding. There's a lot of discussion about the young, it's this current generation. They want everything handed to them, and they should be more grateful and blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, so you're talking about someone who, if we're going to go by what's on TV, the climate's absolutely fucked. They didn't do that. They're going to come out of college probably in more debt than anything they'll ever be able to pay back over the next decade. You kind of set that up. And all this is coming from that sort of a couple of generations ago that have done really well. You're saying, they can't even afford to get their home. I don't know about your country, but in our country, a home deposit's like 100,000 Australian dollars. They can't get that together. And that's because the housing market is so bonkers, because these people own 6 homes per, it's very easy to lay the blame on these younger people. But as you get older, you sort of go, it's not entirely their fault. It's kind of like the adults' fault. And often with gaming and all that sort of stuff, it's, the developers did this, developers did that. But at the top, there's a couple of adults that are dictating all this that goes down through. And it's all good and well to hate the developers, but sometimes you got to think, well, where are they getting their marching orders from? And That's where the root of the real problem is, I reckon.
Yeah, everything you said is right, but I also intent, like I said before, that's the biggest issue for me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's a stupid example, but like I've had people come up to me and be like, "Oh, hey, your bill from RetroRGB, your video saved me $100. Thanks so much." And I'm like, "It's Bob. I really don't give a shit though. Thank you. I appreciate like
yeah.
The intent was there, but like you could come up to me and be like, oh, Bob, like that's my name, but you're being a dick about it."
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Intent is the whole thing. And I think one of the things that I had like an old man moment a year or two ago where I was in a conference and I misunderstood what the panel was going to be about, and it was mostly young college kids, and I'm seeing them walk up to the podium and I'm seeing them ask questions, and I immediately got that old man like, these kids, what are these kids? And then I realized like I understand now why people say that. All of us, including and especially me, when we were that age, we weren't adults. We were just pretending to be. We were mimicking the things that we thought you should say as an adult because we were testing out what it's like to be an adult. And I think a lot of times people forget, actually more than a lot of documentaries I watch where people talk about like, like kids in a murder mystery or something, like where like the one with the American chick from Massachusetts who texted her boyfriend to death, like that was a whole thing. And I'm listening to that documentary and I'm listening to the prosecution talk about that, and they legitimately forgot what it was like to be a kid.
Yeah.
Like I had no recollection, were baffled as to why things were. And I'm just, I have an oddly good memory, especially for somebody that drinks, but like, so I very clearly remember the emotions through all of that. So when I saw those kids acting like that and I got old man grumpy about it, and then it hit me like, oh, I totally understand now. And they probably don't even mean half the stuff they're saying. They're just saying it because they think that's what they have to say. And I'm positive I did that too. I don't remember a specific thing, but guarantee I did. And that's why, like, when I work with younger people, it's the same exact, criteria as working with older people. And it's like, are you the, I hate to bring gender in it, but I think we all know the old man, grumpy IT guy. Like it's a thing. It's a thing in every country. Anytime you have a nerd that's locked in a back room for 40 years, like they're impossible to work with. Every good idea has too much negativity around it. Oh, but if you do that, then you're going to ask for that, and then we're going to be here all weekend. It's like, I dislike that more than the kid trying to be an adult, because you should fucking know better.
You've
lived the whole life of this stuff. Like, get out of your, IT closet basement for 5 minutes. I mean, you work in tech, you have to know 10 guys exactly like that. So
yeah. I think one thing I recall the most about when I have those moments is I don't remember like the details, but I do remember having a distinct lack of acknowledgement of responsibility for my actions and for the world around me.
Definitely.
Like just like I was just until about the age of probably around 25, 26, I was just on a roller coaster. And I was just trying to keep my keys in my pocket and go around this roller coaster as many times as I could for free. And it's not until later on you start to realize, I need to get off the roller coaster and maybe operate the roller coaster a bit and just help other people enjoy the roller coaster, because that's not very hard.
Yeah. And learning the art of keeping your mouth shut is something that's got to come with age.
I'm still learning, my friend.
But that's what I was going back to before, is I'm more calm these days, but also more of a dick. Like, I remember there was like a sales meeting thingy at one company where one of the sales guys was trying to set me up. Just, life, right? Some people are dicks, some people aren't. And he said something with a long pause. He was like, well, when you have people with attitudes like Bob's, and he's saying it slowly, and I afterwards I realized he was trying to get a rise out of me. And I opened my mouth to be like, you want to see a fucking attitude? I just, something clicked. Something clicked.
Bitch switch.
Where I opened my mouth and I shut my mouth. And he goes, I feel like there's hope for this project yet, because he stayed late every day. And he's like, and he went, and he was totally setting me up. He didn't mean it. He was trying to get me to have an outburst, but he knew, like, as he was talking, as my jaw opened, everybody else's did. Like, hey, even if you don't like him, he worked twice as hard as you this week. What the hell are you about to say? So he tried to set me up, and for whatever insane reason, I didn't fall for it. 1 year earlier, I probably would have, but like, yeah, that was like a hard lesson of like, how about you shut your mouth sometimes and listen and see what you learn. And I never forgot that one.
Yeah, it's a good one. I'm still learning. Like I've sort of turned in a couple of promotions to get off the tools and be more involved in meetings and things. And I'm still dragged into them, but I tend to find myself sitting there thinking, I don't know why we're having the same question and answer, 16 different views and versions for an hour and 30 minutes. I think the first 4 minutes we got down what we needed to say. And I find it really frustrating to sit there and listen to it. So like any alcoholic, you don't walk home past the pub, right? You take a different route. So that's me. I choose to just stay out of that, and I will turn down promotions and stay on the tools because I find it too frustrating to listen to humans kind of justify their parking space. It's just sort of how it works.
But I mean, some people love the politics end.
Oh, they do.
They're good at it.
That's
and they're
right.
good people. So like we need people to learn how to navigate that. But I couldn't do that as the main part of my job. That's for sure.
Well, I think what you do is pretty fantastic. Like I said, I like that guy come up and called you Bill and said you saved me $100.
You call me anything you'd like if you're complimenting me.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't really care.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. I still think that. See, I don't spend a lot of time on social media apart from a bit of Instagram and YouTube and stuff. So I don't get on Twitter. I don't get dragged into any of it. But from what I hear, it's a bit of a mental asylum with people just flinging shit at each other. And when you kind of get away,
people practicing to be assholes. And I think so many people forget that. And I think it's also, I think anybody that reads anything on any social media, not just retro gaming, needs to realize like there's a lot of people that this is their favorite game to play. And one thing I say all the time, to the point where I'm sure people are annoyed hearing it, is a good liar will always be believed over just somebody telling the truth. Because they have invested interest, they can get charismatic,
they're practiced,
and they've practiced, and most often the people on the other end of that don't realize that this is a fight. They're just like nope, I'm done with my beer, that's it. And like when a 4-page essay comes out explaining how I actually stole this beer and I had another one waiting, and it's like, what are you fucking talking about? I'm done with my beer. Like, that's the ridiculousness that I've gotten sucked into quite a few times. And it's weird to see how quickly people believe things just because it's written in front of them. It's made me lose faith in a chunk of humanity. But the one thing I will say is that what is social media is not, it has very real consequences in real life, but that's not the majority of the hobby. So, excuse me, like if you jump on social media and you see a whole bunch of toxicity in retro gaming, go to an expo. You'll see what it's really like. The people that look at that and go, well, that's stupid, I'm not getting involved, that's actually the majority of people. So when you're walking around an expo after spending a year and a half on lockdown reading awfulness on Twitter, you're very quickly reminded like, oh, those people are not the majority. Those are the bored people looking for attention. Here's the real people here, and they're all being nice to me. So
beautiful. Good stuff. All right. Well, look, I guess we might kind of wrap it up there. I really do appreciate your time. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I think I've kind of blown smoke up, in your direction quite a bit. And anybody that's kind of out there and is listening and hasn't already come across your YouTube, and there's a bit of Instagram there, but I think that's kind of just backing your YouTube up. Just like another kind of like a pointer marker, like, hey, I'm over here.
All my social media is just designed to point to the website, whether it's a video or a post, whatever else. I
look, things like that clear Super Famicom Shill and a bunch of like the 2 or 3 other things that I've walked away with an understanding of what I think I need. And I think that's probably the key takeaway from my whole conversation with you, and what I wanted to sort of have other people understand is it's not about you must have the best of, or if you buy this, you're an idiot, or if you don't buy this, you're great. But like you said, you're always giving people the options. And you're giving people more than 6 minutes generally of you like sometimes when someone wants to review something in 6 minutes, 6 minutes is a long time, but it's also like it can't be that comprehensive, and it's sort of it melds into the rest of the 4 to 6 minute reviews of things. And
I think 10 minutes and 30 seconds is the goal if you want to be a YouTuber. And
right.
none of my videos are 10 minutes, 30 seconds because I take however long it takes to
Yeah.
get the point across. Sometimes it's 5 minutes. I'm usually wordy, so it's usually 15, 20, but like however I can get the point across fairly so that people could understand it is how long it takes, which is why I'm not a good YouTuber.
Yeah,
So,
wordy. It's so funny. My 10-year-old daughter came home the other day, and she was it was like a couple of weeks ago. It was like World Sloth Day. So she said to her teacher, "Can I do a presentation?" Because she's like a sloth nut, and she did a slideshow and stuff up, and then kind of took it to school and was allowed to give this like 4 minute slideshow presentation about sloths, where they come from generally, and their diet, blah blah blah. And afterwards, she asked one of her friends, like a boy in her class, she's like, "What'd you think, Will?" And he goes, "It was pretty wordy." And she come home and she was like a bit offended. And I said, "That's a compliment. That means that you gave him so much information as a 10-year-old, he didn't really know what to do with it." So never be afraid to be a bit wordy, as opposed to walking away and people thinking, "Well, I don't really know what they were talking about because they didn't really give me anything." I just was thinking that. But look, towards the end, I like to sort of give the guest an opportunity to kind of just plug anything, some shouts and stuff. I always do one. It's usually just someone I'm kind of like seeing in my Instagram feed, Game Boy Micro King. And it's like, as it says, there's a lot of micro Game Boys and there's a lot of other stuff. And Instagram for me is just that little thing that I'm not probably a prolific user, but I just pop on and I look through, and generally what I see makes me happy and makes me want to spend some money. And I can also just enjoy that someone is super successful at gathering things around themselves that they love. So yeah, Game Boy Micro King, go and check out that account on Instagram. And yeah, I'll leave it up to you, Bob, to kick the can for yourself or others, or go.
I like to kick it for others. I just would like to politely remind everybody that a lot of these content creators or developers are funded by Patreon and or whatever support service. I'm also on Floatplane, but there's just, I think a lot of people don't seem to realize how the cost that goes into a lot of these things. There's a lot of Mr. developers out there that have to buy a ton of equipment to make these cores that we're all using. There's a ton of content creators that make reviews and stuff out there that are the real preservation that I always praise. And it's just, if you like it, the greatest thing you could do is spread the word about that. So if you like anybody who has a Patreon and you want them to keep doing it, consider throwing them the minimum. And if you're not in a position to do that, totally cool, but tell other people that would, because there's so many projects that almost didn't make it, and then Patreon pops up and people sign up, and now we have a lot of really amazing stuff. So if you don't like me, that's fine. A lot of people don't, but you might like somebody else that creates anything that relies on that kind of income. So a lot of people, for whatever reason, it's gotten, oh well, it's just another millennial with a basket weaving business or something like that, and it's not it at all. A lot of this stuff is incredibly expensive, and throwing $1 a month to support somebody, and especially telling other people about it, that's the stuff where it's like, hey, that project that's been people have been working on for years, this person just stepped up and finished it because you gave them enough to buy a HDMI analyzer or something like that, and they were able to finish it. So my shout outs and my plugs are to everybody else, and that if you like somebody, please spread the word.
Awesome. All right, buddy. Look, I tried not to fanboy out too much. I kind of got to lay out my system before we started the conversation, but you're in that. My feed's fairly minimal as far as YouTube goes, but I'm always checking out your weekly roundups, and maybe a fifth of it goes over my head, but I'm comfortable that it's probably something that I don't need to worry about, and the rest of it, I'm like, wow, that is cool, and I need to put a few dollars away for that, or I need to go and check that person out, like you said. And I think that anybody that listens to this podcast would probably get a very similar positive experience. So thank you, mate. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. It's an evening there, a couple of extra beers to get you through, and I do really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. I appreciate you having me.
All right, buddy. I will see you around. You won't see me, but thank you so much.
Take care.
All right, see you, buddy.